Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chakayla Coulter, and welcome to my presentation on understanding imposter syndrome, also known as IS, and titled Do I Deserve All This? So just a brief introduction. So like I said, my name is Chakayla. I am the current graduate assistant for online student success here at Loyola Online. Just a shameless plug to my great office that we do a lot of work making sure that we're working with our online students to make sure they feel supported throughout their academic journey. And so really love the work that we do with our office, and I enjoy being a graduate assistant there. Um, I also am a current graduate student at Loyola, pursuing a Master's of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. And so that makes me a really big mental health advocate and a self-care enthusiast. I love talking about overall well-being and overall wellness within ourselves and making sure that we're doing well mentally, physically, emotionally. And sometimes that just means like a really good face mask at night and some good music. So those are some of my things. And then as a person of color, as a Black woman, I have experienced imposter syndrome. So who better to talk about and discuss this type of topic besides someone, of course, who has gone through it? Just wanted to touch briefly on what is imposter syndrome. So according to McLean Hospital, imposter syndrome can be defined as the experience of repeated feelings or thoughts that one is incompetent or not good enough despite having a ton of evidence to the contrary. So thoughts of imposter syndrome can look like, I'm a fake, I'm a phony, I don't deserve this job, am I smart enough to be in this class, am I good enough, am I qualified? And so these type of thoughts can be really common, but they, if they remain persistent, that can be what is described as imposter syndrome. And so to my right, there's like a little picture there where, you have a woman looking at herself and looking and not understanding that there's a bit of duality, like not understanding that that's, a different person in the mirror sometimes. And so IS can happen to anyone. And so no matter how successful or your level of expertise, it can happen. And those thoughts and feelings can occur no matter what. And so, moving on to some common signs and characteristics of imposter syndrome, it can be those feelings of feeling like a fraud despite having the achievements and despite having tons of evidence to the contrary. It can also look like difficulty accepting praise. Also, fear of being found out or exposed for the fraud that you are in quotations. Overworking to cover up what you perceive to be incompetence. It can also look like discrediting your success as luck or just having really good timing. And then it can also look like having really high levels of anxiety and stress or self-doubt in those spaces. And so in those spaces specifically, because you'll have anxiety, you'll have stress, but in spaces like academia, your career, your work field, having those really high levels of anxiety and stress and questioning yourself in those spaces specifically, that can also look like a characteristic of IS. And so moving into the types of imposter syndrome, because there are 5 different types and they all look a little bit differently. So the first one being the perfectionist. They are the one that will set an impossibly high goal and standard and then will feel like a failure when they don't meet them. Um, Another one is the superhero, the person who is overachieving to try to strive to prove that they are not a fraud, and it can look excessively. The natural genius. So, kind of in the name, it's a person who will kind of struggle when tasks are more difficult or take longer to master than expected. So, the natural genius, when things come really easy to them, and then it's that time where, okay, this is a little bit more challenging, and then it'll have them doubting their abilities and their skills. That can be what that looks like. The experts. So it's a person, which I kind of think this one is interesting. They can feel like they don't know enough or they're not the expert of the task, but more likely than not, they're someone is really well versed and has a lot of expertise in the field. So think about your favorite psychology professor having a lot of doubt about knowing psychology. Well, who better to learn from than a psychology professor that's been studying this for years, but still having that same questioning and questioning their expertise? That can be something what that looks like. And then the last one is the soloist, which I kind of found was interesting in the graphic because he's off to the side. Is the person that believes that asking for help will be a sign of weakness or incompetence. So they'll try to do really hard tasks and sometimes things that just requires a little bit of support. They'll try to do those things on their own because they're scared that they asking for help will look weak or incompetent. So, why does this matter? And what are some impacts of imposter syndrome? So, imposter syndrome, like I said, can happen to anyone and can occur anywhere in a ton of different ways, since we just saw. So, because it can be both prevalent, meaning its occurrences, and how much is showing up, but also can be inescapable, as in just really likely to happen, it's really important to note that it can impact you by reducing your self esteem and confidence in those classes and in your field. So it makes you, prone to more increased amounts of stress and burnout. And so what that can look like is you putting a whole lot more tasks on your plate because you're trying to, cover up what people are perceiving as incompetence, and you're putting a lot of stress on yourself, and you're lowering your confidence in the same manner, and then that leads to burnout and to being overly tired and just overworked in a way that you might not have to. And then it can also look like having problems advancing your career or in your personal life. Imagine constantly questioning yourself and then still wanting to be advanced in your career, but something's holding you back from even taking the leap. That can be an impact of IS. It also, which I thought was really interesting, can limit your capacity to take risk and embrace new opportunities out of out of fear of being found out that you're a fraud or that you're not as good as you think you are. And so it limits your ability to take those risks and to try to take and go for further things because you're scared that people are going to find out that you're really just not that good. And then the last one can also lead to impaired decision making and can kind of impair your ability to also be creative. Um, and then, so what are some causes of imposter syndrome? Why do we sometimes feel like imposters? It's a ton of different things. Some of them are not all listed, of course, but some main ones I really wanted to talk about were some adverse childhood experiences, also known in the psychology counseling field as ACEs. It can look like being really over criticized or seeking validation and not getting it in return. And so imagine school age, you're in school and you're having a really tough teacher that's really overcritical of how you're performing in math. And so you go throughout thinking that you're just not really good at math and you lack that expertise, but it might be something that you're really good in as well. And it can also just kind of manifest later on with all different factors included into something like imposter syndrome. Societal pressures or stereotyping, going into like having certain expectations in being a certain gender or a certain race. It can also look like really high expectations of perfection or perfectionism, which we saw as one of the types a couple slides back. The perfectionist was one of the types of imposter syndrome. It can also look like a constant comparison to others, constantly trying to do something similarly and or better than the next person. Um, and then I know this is obviously a big one, especially in our day and age with social media and needing that external validation. We know how much we look to, not just in imposter syndrome, but just in anything looking towards how many likes, viewers, and subscribers we are getting in some of our media. And so having that external validation is something that can also lead to us feeling like imposters in other aspects as well. And then also, of course, just having different cultural or environmental factors included, where you're raised regionally, what you're doing, as far as like in your family dynamics and things, what's expected of you, that can also be a cause of imposter syndrome. And so to my side is a little graphic that it's like green, the green portion shows people who get imposter syndrome. The orange part shows the other people who get imposter syndrome. And then you get the blue side, which is literally everyone else because they also get imposter syndrome. So everyone feels like an imposter sometimes, and that's okay. And so I just want to show a couple of examples of real world, real life important figures who have had interviews or discussions where they talked about imposter syndrome. And so you see Albert Einstein, where he talked about his exaggerated esteem in which his life work held makes him feel very ill at ease. He felt compelled to think of himself as an involuntary swindler because of how much we put credit into his work. Then you have someone like Michelle Obama, who said she still has a little bit of imposter syndrome and it doesn't just go away. That feeling that, you shouldn't take me that seriously. Because what does she know? And then she shares with us with all her doubts and her abilities about her power and what that power is. You have Emily Watson, who says it's almost like the better I do, the more my feeling of inadequacy actually increases because I'm just going, any moment, someone's going to find out I'm a total fraud and that I don't deserve any of what I've achieved. And then Tom Hanks's last, where he talks about no matter what he's done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here? When are they going to discover that I am, in fact, a fraud and take everything away from me? And so just seeing, at least to me, makes me feel a little bit better that this just doesn't happen to just real world, regular people that's on the street, but also to some of our most prominent scientists, actresses, political figures, and actors. So to know that it's really relatable and, in a sense, accessible, almost tangible, even, it feels a lot more comforting to know that this does happen and its prevalence doesn't just affect real life people like myself and like you. And so the question now is, am I doomed forever? Am I going to be stuck dealing with this type of thing forever? An obvious answer is no. And so today I'll also be able to provide with you guys some different strategies to combat imposter syndrome because there is good news. You can overcome imposter syndrome. And so here are some really unique strategies how. So the first one being is, of course, recognition and acknowledgement. So understanding that imposter syndrome is common and normal. Like I just saw in a couple slides before, that it happens to not just me, it happens to Michelle Obama. Knowing that I'm going through something that Michelle Obama does makes me feel a little bit better about where I am in life. I'll say that. And so understanding that imposter syndrome is common and normal is just the first step. And then it can also look like you reframing some of those negative thoughts, replacing some of your self-doubt with a lot more self-compassion. And so I know we've heard the word negative self-talk kind of being, used lately. And so replacing that maybe with some more positive self-talk and positive affirmations over yourself to reframe some of those negative thinking. It can also look like celebrating your own achievements. Keep track of your wins and successes, no matter how big or small. Something that my friends tell me is to celebrate my wins no matter what. And I know that makes me feel really good, especially celebrating even small ones. And so celebrating those achievements is a great strategy to combat that imposter syndrome. And you can also look like seeking mentorship and support, talking to others about your feelings, talking to other people about what you're going through, because sometimes just leveling with someone and realizing that, hey, I'm going through the same exact thing, sometimes I know it makes me feel better. And so I know that can also be something that's really useful in this as a strategy as well. It'll also look like setting realistic expectations, accepting that no one is perfect. Like I just said, I know that Michelle Obama is going through this. I know Emily Watson is going through this. So no one is perfect. Even our most prominent, like I said, political figures and actresses are going through some similar things or have gone through similar things. And so accepting that no one is perfect and to set those realistic expectations. That's not to say that, you can't aim big, but to, some of those points in the previous slides about having really like overachieving to try to compensate for what you think someone is noticing. And that's, that might not be realistic for you at the time. So making sure that you set realistic and smart goals. It can also look like just embracing imperfection and understanding that mistakes are just a part of growth, a stepping stone to where you're going and what you want to achieve. And so that can look like you also taking some mindset shifts and building up that confidence. And so having these thoughts can obviously be really hard. You can, start by shifting your mindset to a more positive way of thinking. Instead of I'm a fraud, I'm a phony, try I'm not an imposter, I'm learning and I'm growing. Instead of I should know how to do this, try everyone starts somewhere and it's okay not to have all the answers. Instead of I need to be perfect all the time, I have to be, try perfection is not the goal. My progress is. And so imposter syndrome can bring down that self-confidence and self-worth over time with with all the things about self-doubt and all that frustration. And so to start rebuilding this confidence, you can focus on effort, not just outcomes. You can practice some of those self affirmations and positive self talk. And then it might also be helpful to develop a growth mindset where mistakes are a part of the learning process. And then starting by setting achievable goals and break them down into small steps. Just imagine, like I was talking about, setting realistic expectations. It's not that you can't aim big. It's not that you can't have really big ambitions and goals. It's that you want to make sure that they're achievable and you want to make sure that they're within your scope of practice, within your abilities and within what you know you can achieve. And that starts by also seeing it maybe as smaller steps towards that big goal. And so, just to conclude, and some key takeaways I want to provide is that imposter syndrome can be a common experience, but it doesn't have to define who you are and what you represent. You can take the time to recognize your achievements and how much you have grown because it didn't just happen by accident. When you feel those tough feelings coming up or those thoughts creep in, it's important to seek support and discuss it with another person because sometimes it just takes a second to be like, how crazy does this really sound to say it out loud? And challenge that self doubt. You want to continue to embrace this new and improved mindset built on new shifts to positive thinking and one that prioritizes your progress and your learning. And then I also wanted to provide a couple of really cool resources to you guys. And so there's two books on here. The first one I haven't read, the second one I have personally. The first book is The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women and Men, Why Capable People Suffer from Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It by Dr. Valerie Young. And it says, I know that that book actually has really good reviews on Amazon, and that's one I actually do aim to read. And so I know that that's a good option as well. And then the second book is You Are a Bad, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life by Jen Sincero. This one is also on Amazon. It is also a really great book. I think I saw it on TikTok a little bit, and that made me kind of want to read it. And then where I had got the resource from, some of the definitions and things came from McLean Hospital, and they also had a ton of resources available as well on the site, as far as different links to hotlines and resources about like just general information about imposter syndrome and different methods to how to combat it, as well as maybe even like I think a type quiz where you can figure out which of the five you are and like maybe some useful skills and tips to each of those different types. And then another really cool site was the Imposter Syndrome Institute, which I can click on a link, but I'll send it to you all as well in the chat, which also had some really useful like facts and resources and also some celebrity and like relatable conversations that were on there as well, which I thought was really cool. And then um, I just want to open up the floor to, of course, questions. And if anybody has any questions, they are free to come off mute or and ask them. give you all of a second. And if there aren't any questions, I do just want to, of course, extend a warm thank you to everyone for coming. And
Chakayla, you do have a question in the
oh,
chat. Can you see it?
oh, I'm sorry, I could not see, guys. Let me go back. Let me see. Thank you. Oh, the question says, I know I couldn't see it before. It says, do you think imposter syndrome can ever have positive effects, like motivating people to work harder? And then where's the line between motivation and harm? Wow, that's actually a really great question. Um, I think sometimes since imposter syndrome, I think happens more frequently than not. I think sometimes it can have more positive effects. I know I know something I was experiencing just somatically was when I was doing this presentation and being a woman of color and doing it, I'm like, oh, I should really have a really good, time talking about this and really being like a great spokesperson for this. But I also was kind of experiencing a little bit of imposter syndrome with this as well, as far as like, am I even qualified to talk about this? And I think it's really interesting because it did kind of make me work a little bit harder in making sure that um, I wanted to do a really great job and wanted to do a great job of conveying the information. And so I did have that motivation to like kind of come from here. And I think it might have, stemmed a bit from the imposter syndrome. But so I do also think it could have some positive effects. I think when it becomes, more excessive and a little bit more demanding and it kind of starts to impede your decision making and things like that, where you don't want to take the risk or don't want to take the leap, I think that can be where it starts to be a little bit more negative. So say, for example, if I decided, I didn't want to give this presentation because I just felt too much like a fraud, then that would be something I would see more as like a negative effect. And then I do think that that line, as with anything, can be thin between motivation and harm. Like I said, I think if when it's in excess, it can be definitely a little bit more harmful. But I think there's a lot of power also in being aware of it and being able to recognize it, and that being something that you can stem your motivation and stem to give you the motivation to do well. So thank you, Lauren Jones, for that question. And then another question I saw from Stephanie, it says, what has personally worked for you in terms of overcoming imposter syndrome? Oh, that's a really great question as well. I would say, well, definitely being a counseling student, it takes a lot of tried and true methods. And of course, me being in mental health, I always try to prioritize that. And so, something that personally works for me is a lot of self-care. I think self-care is the best care. I personally enjoy taking care of myself and pouring into me. And so sometimes when I'm feeling like I'm not ready to be in a space, I recognize all of my small wins. And I think I owe a lot of that to like my friends and my family for always, like I said, pouring into me. The community in which you come from is a really big factor in how you act and how you are. And so leaning on them in support is just a really great way for me to and overcome that imposter syndrome, just because sometimes just have my mom tell me that like I'm good enough, you've worked really hard to get here, is more than enough to transcend me through a couple of semesters of really tough graduate school classes. So those are some things. And then also, just like I said, face care, face and skin care routine is like something I do really diligently, hanging out with my friends, trying foods. Those are really big things. I think also just having that a part of my routine and constantly being surrounded by support and love, so that when I'm feeling those feelings, I'm accessible to someone to be like, girl, I think I'm crazy. And they're able to kind of, reel me in a little bit and bring me back to what I know I'm capable of and what I know I can achieve. And so thank you, Stephanie, for that question. And I hope that answers it. Um, I just saw two questions from Chardonnay that say, the first one is, what are some coping mechanisms you have personally used when dealing with imposter syndrome? Oh, thank you. It was some of the same ones like I had mentioned previously, just like, leaning on my community, leaning on my friends, being just remembering why I'm in these spaces and remembering that I've earned a right to be there because I didn't come this far just to come this far. And I also have worked really hard and I have the the accolades and the achievements to show it, but I also know it personally in myself that I've done the work to get here. And so I think I would be doing myself a really big disservice if I didn't take advantage of those opportunities when I know I've been presented them for a reason. And then would you agree that the more successful you are, the more susceptible you are to imposter syndrome? I definitely I can agree with that question, or with that answer, more so just because I didn't realize this until I was doing the presentation, but I didn't realize how many people like Emily Watson and Tom Hanks and just really, big celebrities and names in entertainment have gone through imposter syndrome and have talked about it so easily in interviews. And so I think that it made it more tangible, realizing that like this is something that's real and can happen to people. And I just did not realize like how these like I'm thinking almost of them almost on a pedestal where like they have everything at their hands and their feet, and so like you're getting the jobs, you're getting the bookings. How could you not realize how successful you are, and how could you not be more proud of that accomplishment? But then I didn't think about the fact that sometimes getting those things and feeling like you might have earned them, other people are dealing with a really big internal battle where they're like, people are going to find out that I'm an imposter. People are going to figure out that like I'm really not that good at acting, and realizing that like that's something that they even think about. So when I'm in class and I'm thinking about myself, like how did I even end up here? It makes it feel more, like I said, just real tangible and real accessible that it can happen to me too. And so I think you do risk being more susceptible to imposter syndrome, having more success and having more resources at your feet. But I also think you're also more able to be a spokesperson and to share your story um and to share like strategies in different ways when you've had that experience, and it might make it more just more connecting and more tangible to your people. Um, And then I think I just saw, oh, thank you guys. Thank you all for coming. I didn't know if you guys had any more questions, but I see some really sweet comments, and I want to say thank you guys. Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I'll go ahead and let me see if there's any more questions. Oh, well, I do just want to extend a thank you to everyone for attending our imposter syndrome webinar. I do hope that we continue to have such a good outpour and everything, and support from you all. And I thank you all for taking the time to come and sharing this. And I hope that I gave you guys some really useful tips and useful information you're able to take away with you. And so I don't have anything else on my side. And so I do just want to wish everyone a happy Tuesday and a happy December. Thank you.